What is going on, everybody? James Hancock here. I'm back to review episode 2 of season 2 of House of the Dragon. And as is always the case, there will be spoilers. If you're concerned with finding out what happened, well, then go watch the episode. It's available on Max, but holy shit, some stuff did happen this episode. And while A Son for a Son did have that grisly murder at the end, I think it was less satisfying for a lot of fans because they tapped the brakes creatively so much, at least in comparison to the source material. However, some of the grisly death and murder which took place this episode was much more kind of accurate to the text. So let us all tip our hat or pour out a drink in honor of Sir Eric Cargill, as well as Sir Eric Cargill. One has an E, one has an A, but I guess a war is not a war, or a civil war is not a civil war until you have brother versus brother, father versus son, cousin versus cousin, etc. and so forth. And we'd obviously already seen bloodshed between family members at the end of season 1 when Aemon killed Luke. But this was the first family-on-family crime outside of the Targaryen family, which shows how the bloodlust and the murder and the depravities will continue to spill over. And as they said in the teaser for next week's episode, at a certain point, people will forget why this war was started in the first place as their bloodlust starts to consume them. Because keep in mind, the Seven Kingdoms at this point has enjoyed a long period of peace and prosperity, but it's a warrior culture. I mean, they're constantly jousting and having tournaments and training for war and for battle, and that's one of the only ways in this fictional setting to kind of move up in the world. So the forces are moving, and I can't wait to see where things go. And also keep in mind, this is only an 8-episode season. I would almost recommend to the writers and directors of the show, if they were taking requests, pick up the pace a little bit, because the season's going to be over before we know it, and it's time to get to some of the major events of the war. But speaking of major events of the war, let us all also salute the great Rhys Ifans, who sadly was demoted or lost his position as Hand of the King. He served 3 different kings throughout the course of his career, and now that Aegon and Sir Criston Cole will not have his supervision, well, basically the dogs will break their chains and they will be off to war, as was also teased in the teaser for next week's episode. And what was interesting was how, at the very end, Alicent, who has been kind of level-headed and measured and shown compassion and restraint and that sort of thing, she almost seemed to be totally fine with the fact that the most wise and experienced individual imaginable he's basically having to retreat back to Old Town. But she got together with Cole, slapped the shit out of him a few times, and then it was game on. So it's going to be interesting to see, as Cole and Aegon start to do really horrible things, how will she respond? But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's slow down and take things one beat and one scene at a time. But I do have to give a shout out to Tom Glenn Carney. I must say, toward the end of season 1, I wasn't necessarily all that impressed with him as an actor and his interpretation of the character of Aegon. Now he's one of my favorite characters in the show. Like, I'm not saying I admire him or I respect him or look up to him, but he's hilarious and he's deranged and he's unhinged and he's unpredictable. And in many ways, he's still like a pissed off son who never got the attention from his father that he felt he deserved. He basically, from like the time he was a boy onward, should have been sitting in on all of Viserys' meetings and that sort of thing and learning how to be an adult. Even if he wasn't destined to be king, he should, at a minimum, just learned how to be a member of like the small council and a member of society and just basically be an asset as opposed to just a kind of a booze-swilling, womanizer. And now that you add on top of that the absolutely grisly and horrific murder of his son, let's just say that he is wrestling with a lot of conflicting emotions. As we saw toward the end of the episode when he's just weeping inconsolably. Like, he might talk a big game and he doesn't want to be perceived as weak, but as Otto Hightower pointed out at one point during the episode, you are perceived as weak. And so, yeah, without giving away any spoilers, let's just say Aegon, in an effort to prove that he is not weak, may or may not be about to commit a few strategic blunders. But I feel like no matter how great a book might be that you're basing a show on, or no matter how great your writing staff and directing staff might be for a particular show, if you don't have great actors bringing the characters to life, then you are totally screwed. So I think Tom Glenn Carney turned out to be world-class casting, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if he becomes a lot of people's favorite character by the end of the season. And what else do we got in my notes? I like seeing Aemon kind of coolly investigating as his brother was flying into a rage. Sadly, Aegon started dismantling his father's model of old Valyria, which kind of hurt my feelings because I'm obsessed with all the little scraps of information that we know about old Valyria from the text. Anyway, we know so precious little. It was a shame to see the model dismantled in such a fashion, but I like seeing Aemond being kind of calm under fire while his brother was, just acting like an hysterical, screaming child. And it was also interesting seeing how Aemond has finally developed an interest in the sins of the flesh. Like, one of my only complaints about House of the Dragon compared to Game of Thrones is that House of the Dragon definitely is much more chaste and much more buttoned up when it comes to on-screen nudity and sex and that sort of thing. But we got a little hint, a little tease of this little orgy where he's basically curled up in a little fetal position in this girl's lap, talking about how maybe he acted in haste when he killed Luke because they used to make fun of him a long time ago. So yeah, Aemond continues to be a very interesting character, and I love how when he walks around, he's just so calm, and he's so he moves like a big jungle cat. And anyway, he's one of the best swordsmen on the side of the Greens, and I'm just eagerly looking forward to seeing him on his dragon Vhagar, flying over armies, led by Kristen Cole, marching off to war. It's gonna get fucking ugly. And speaking of Sir Kristen Cole, he's becoming an increasingly complex and interesting character, where we see at one point where he's basically calling out Sir Eric. I don't know which Eric has the A and which one has the E, but the one that's on the side of the Greens, I feel like it's a common problem that a lot of people have, where if they're ashamed of themselves, they will call people out for the flaws that they perceive in that person that they also have in themselves. And after Aegon justifiably called out Cole during the meeting of the small council, like, where were you when my fucking son and heir was getting beheaded? Cole basically decides to take it out on Sir Eric, and he says, look, you have brought shame upon us, and the only way you're going to kind of alleviate that shame is by traveling to Dragonstone, impersonating your twin brother, sneaking into Rhaenyra's bedroom, and killing the queen and saving all these lives. But the fact that the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard is making those decisions without Otto Hightower signing off or without the small council shows he's definitely getting a little bit over his skis. However, he gets rewarded for taking the initiative because Aegon is a child, and Aegon wants to take action, and Aegon wants blood. And so when Aegon and Otto Hightower inevitably have their knockdown, drag-out, family squabble, Cole steps up to the role of Hand of the King. So yeah, he is moving up in the world and becoming increasingly powerful and influential. But it's just interesting seeing how Cole, he's fucked up. He's got a lot of divided loyalties. He's supposed to be completely pure as the driven snow and a life of chastity devoted to the Kingsguard, and yet he's boning the king's mother at every opportunity. So I love characters that have flaws and contradictions. So Kristen Cole continues to become increasingly interesting. And speaking of interesting characters, Clubfoot only got a little bit of screen time this episode, but he made the most of it because he reports to the small council that at least one of the killers has been found trying to sneak out of the Red Keep with the head of young Jaehaerys. And so they decide to, I guess it's Blood. Cheese is the rat catcher. Blood is the former Gold Cloak. But they decide to interrogate him, and we're seeing all these medieval instruments of torture that they're threatening with. And he's like, are you going to hurt me? And he's like, well, no, I'm not going to hurt you, but maybe the king might. I can't remember the exact line of dialogue, but Aegon walks in and just bashes his goddamn brains out and decides in his infinite wisdom, since he can't figure out which rat catcher played a role in the murder of his son, he'll just kill and hang every single rat catcher in the city, which completely destroys all the goodwill, at least within King's Landing, that might have been kind of developed over the murder of Jaehaerys, because we see during that funeral procession, as Helaena is completely recoiling in horror from the common people reaching out to her, she does have the love and affection and kind of the goodwill of the people. But Aegon, he's one of those people that loves to snatch victory, or actually no, he likes to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. As soon as they establish that goodwill, he completely squandered it by just murdering a bunch of innocent men, even if he did actually get the right rat catcher Cheese. And in a strange, complex moment, we see his abused dog, which he got kicked the previous episode, looking up at his master and whimpering on his behalf. But one thing I found interesting throughout the episode is how Alicent keeps trying to confess her sins. At one point, she tries to address the fact that Helaena walked in on her screwing Cole, and obviously it would bring so much shame and so much embarrassment, on their family and just on Team Green, if it were known that the mother of the king was screwing the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard. But Helaena, her mind's it's been so snapped by the murder of her child, she can't even listen. And then later on in the episode, Alicent tells her father Otto, I've sinned. And he's just like, I can't remember what he says, but he's completely uninterested in whatever she wants to get off her chest. He's got bigger things on his plate. So it looks like Alicent now, I don't know if she's interpreting everybody's lack of interest in her sin as just a green light to do whatever she wants, but that definitely seems to be the case. But yeah, I must admit, I've got a little bit of a thing for the actress who plays her, so I don't mind this direction for her character, not one bit. But another interesting scene takes place between Rhaenyra and Daemon, where she learns that he may or may not have exceeded his authority when she said, like, I want Aemon Targaryen, and Daemon was like, well, fuck it, like, I'm going to go out and get a son for a son. And it was interesting seeing kind of the ebb and flow and the push and pull in their conversation, because on one hand, she no longer trusts Daemon, and she basically wants to know, like, do you accept me as your queen and ruler? And his counter is, if you start to follow, like in the footsteps of your father, who at least Daemon perceived as weak. I think Viserys as a character showed incredible wisdom and incredible restraint and a great sense of honor and duty. But from Daemon's point of view, Viserys was the weaker of the two brothers, and he never should have been king in the first place. But it was interesting how, from Daemon's point of view, he's acting in Rhaenyra's best interest. But basically she says, like, go and do whatever the hell you want. And then my favorite shot of the entire episode, and it's a shot that was featured prominently in the trailer, we see Daemon leaving Dragonstone in that full badass Targaryen armor flying off on Caraxes. And Caraxes is getting big. Like, he might not be as big as Vhagar, but Caraxes is a fearsome beast. And if anyway, everybody knows that he's flying off to Harrenhal, but what we saw in the teaser, it looks like next episode is going to be the Daemon episode. We see him in full armor, in the rain, sneaking around a castle. It looks like Daemon basically, like, you never know how the show is going to tackle certain events from the book, but the way Daemon goes after Harrenhal in the book might be a complete departure from the way they handle it in the show. So I'm very excited to see what Daemon is going to do next episode. But I've been ranting and raving quite a bit at this point without offering any criticisms. I have one, not major criticism, but I do have a criticism or a concern or a note of caution. And we had a scene with Hugh, and I'm not going to give away any spoilers, but Hugh is a major character later in the war, and we see this scene where his wife's basically struggling to feed their daughter, who's clearly sick, and how the blockade is already affecting King's Landing. People are hoarding food and that sort of thing. And what I don't like about that scene is how it's trying to elicit our sympathy for the character of Hugh, because as written in the book, let's just say Hugh's not the world's most honorable human being. And I worry that this will be another situation where the show tries to soften somebody, or basically, I can't stand this modern trend where nobody's allowed just to be a villain or a piece of shit. Everybody has to be a misunderstood victim. I really hope they don't try to turn Hugh into a misunderstood victim, because, small spoiler, he's not a victim at all. He's a total piece of shit, and I want to see him be a total piece of shit. But who knows, maybe they feel like on this show that there are enough people who are total pieces of shit already, and that they're all full up on that front. But speaking of characters who have a major role to play in later chapters in the story, we got to see Adam, the brother of Alan. Alan is bald, Adam has the dreadlocks. And I'm not going to give away any spoilers. And I won't even say whether or not Adam turns out to be a really noble guy or a really evil guy. All I'll say is that he is a part of great deeds and great scenes, and he's an incredible character. And there was an interesting bit of foreshadowing in the show where he's out, I guess he's crabbing, and he's looking for food and that sort of thing, and he looks up and he sees a dragon flying along. And I was looking closely. I believe the dragon did not have a rider. And on the island of Dragonstone, and also around Driftmark, you do have a few wild dragons that don't have riders, but they kind of live in caves, and they live off like fish and sheep and that sort of thing. All I'll say is that's some major foreshadowing for the character of Adam. And if they capture even half of Adam's deeds from the book Fire and Blood in the show, Adam is going to rapidly become one of everybody's favorite characters. But we might have to wait until season 3 before we really get to see Adam do what he does. But Alan's a cool character as well. But Adam, there's a scene which I can't describe, but just made me very interested in the character of Adam, but it comes much later on. But the two major show-stopping scenes this episode were all saved for the end. One was the dramatic confrontation between Otto and Aegon and Cole, and I loved how Otto's just blasting his grandson out of the water, and Cole's like, watch it, like you're talking to the king, and Otto's like, he's my grandson. I will talk to him however I please. And he's basically blasting him out of the water for eliminating all the goodwill that they've been developing. And then when he learns that Cole has sent an assassin to Dragonstone, I mean, Otto is just beside himself. He's just he has the burden of being one of the most experienced and one of the most intelligent and one of the most strategic guys in the room, but he's surrounded by much younger men who are impulsive and impetuous and are eager for action. And as a result, Aegon ends up stripping his grandfather of his badge of office, and he hands it over to Cole. And I thought that was a great scene. The only downside is that, depending upon how the show is written, that means we might see less of Rhys Ifans in future episodes. And I think he's by far one of the best actors on the show. But as Otto prepares to leave King's Landing, he did make an interesting allusion to the character of Darren, who lives in Old Town. He says, "There's a grandson who still listens." Like Adam, I can't say if Darren will turn out to be a noble person or an evil person, but I will say that Darren, he will also be responsible for big deeds. Once again, I'm being very careful in my wording. He will be responsible for major deeds in the chapters to come and in the wars to come. Because also, as we saw tonight, when Eric and Eric die, it's like the cast can't just slowly but surely dwindle away as everybody kills each other. Like, new characters will have to emerge, and so the cast of characters by the time we get to season 3 will probably bear very little resemblance to the cast of characters we enjoy right now in season 2. So don't get too attached to anybody. Remember, this is the world of George R.R. Martin, and murder and betrayal and mayhem is definitely those are the areas where George R.R. Martin excels. But before I wrap up this video, I just want to call attention to that battle between Eric and Eric, which I just thought was awesome. It was the first time in season 2 where I got chills, and if you've been following my channel for any length of time, I look at shows and movies in a lot of ways like a narcotic. And when that narcotic is working, I do get a real physical response. If I didn't get like the chills from watching a cool show or a cool movie, I would read books or play video games or watch MMA or whatever the case may be. But the only time I get chills like that is from that weird chemical combination of sight and sound and the way it interacts with my brain and my imagination. And seeing those two brothers who love each other and hate each other and both think that the other has betrayed a cause that they have basically been sworn to. I just love that mix of emotions. Like, it is possible to love and hate somebody at the same time, and it was just absolutely ruthless. And I very quickly lost track of which one was which, except for when one was trying to kill Rhaenyra over and over and over again. And I was worried that they would do something stupid with the show, like Rhaenyra pulling out a dagger and saving the day or whatever. It's like, no, let it be Eric versus Eric. One gets killed, one falls on his sword, and I just thought it was a scene of incredible dramatic power. But it'll be interesting to see now, how does Rhaenyra respond now that like she was horrified by the murder of Jaehaerys, but now that she's got assassins in her bedroom coming after her, maybe she will look at some of Daemon's actions in a different light and realize, holy shit, this war is escalating, as they say in Anchorman, like, that escalated quickly. Shit is escalating quickly, and it's like, we're still kind of in like the beginning of the, I guess, that exponential curve, but things are about to whoop, like, really ramp up. In any event, I really enjoyed this episode. I think it's a stronger episode than the first episode, but I'll be interested to hear what people think. And also, the viewership was down for the season 2 premiere. My theory is that anytime a show goes away for 2 years, it's always a struggle to get everybody to come back for the next season. And also, I feel like that episode, it didn't have quite enough kind of grit and grizzle and bloodshed to really get people talking. But if people remember Game of Thrones back when it was like, in its heyday, it was one season every year, and I think there was a 2-year break right before season 8. But it's like, it's easy to keep people on the hook when it's just like nothing but Game of Thrones, either trailers and teasers or news or the actual show year round. I think it would be ill-advised for House of the Dragon ever to take another 2-year break again, and I hope it won't be a 2-year break before season 3, because there's just too much cool shit on the horizon. But I hope that fans of House of the Dragon and Game of Thrones will be more satisfied by this episode as opposed to the last. But I get it. People thought that the first episode was a little underwhelming. We're all audience members, and we're all giving our time and attention and our eyeballs. Like, it's an attention economy, and if people feel frustrated, well, then that's a fully justifiable emotion. But just knowing what's in the book and what's to come, for me, I can afford to be more patient because I'm so excited to see certain scenes. Like, I'd almost be willing to sit through like 3 or 4 really boring episodes as long as they get to the scenes that I like from the book and adapt them well. But if at any point during the season, some of the scenes that I really like are adapted poorly, well, you will see me raging like Aegon, smashing the toy city of Old Valyria. But that's all I've got to say for now. Hope everybody enjoyed the episode. Let me know what you think down in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to the channel, hitting that notification bell, and hitting the little notification bell and all that good stuff. But I hope everybody has a fantastic week, but more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.